Welcome to another episode of the Distributed Data Show, brought to you by DataStax Academy, where we bring you the latest news and interview technical experts to help you succeed at building large-scale distributed systems.
Hi, I'm Adron, and this is Travis Mattera.
Very good.
And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about what Travis is working on right now.
And what I want to learn.
And what you want to learn. So a little bit of give and take here. So you've recently started working on an environment that could be termed multi-cloud.
Yes.
With a whole bunch of stuff in it. There's databases, applications, all sorts of things spread throughout these.
We are striding clouds.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Clouds.
Straddling clouds, yeah. So and you also go beyond just multi-cloud into the hybrid cloud realm too, where you have some on-prem. Right?
Yes, it's a very complex model.
Yeah.
And there's some really antiquated point-of-sale based stuff that's on-prem.
Interesting.
You know, there's probably some COBOL in there at some point. And then there's also one of the main players in town, AWS. And we are migrating, or at least diversifying with GCP.
Oh, one of the other main players.
One of the other main big players.
Yeah.
That's all around town. And
Nice.
We're just feeling that out. Right now, we're not trying to literally have our applications sitting in both and managing
But some of it,
them
but some
together.
of it is in both. So how are you dealing with applications that are kind of in both, or
So that's
like some are in prod in one environment and some are in prod in the other environment, right?
Well, so for what I've seen, all our applications sit in one or the other cloud.
Oh, okay.
We have not.
So there's not a distributed nature between them. There is
Not yet.
Frank app is here and Sally's app is over here.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we have regional distribution for our apps in a particular cloud provider.
Yeah.
And we're looking at migrating potentially to one cloud
Well,
provider.
being that there's usages of Cassandra and such in the back end, that can make that aspect of things much easier to straddle between those.
Yeah.
Even if your application isn't aware of said database being over in whatever cloud, as long as it knows it's in one, you can still have that across both. Then you have your data here and there and distributed.
Yeah.
So easier to migrate if you want to migrate that way. You just get another cluster running over here and boom.
Well, one of the things we're dealing with now is a culture shift, which is that not everything has to be hidden behind walls of obscurity. Where you have private endpoints for all your apps. We're trying to push towards a different paradigm, which is have everything public available, but then secured with authentication. So once you make everything public, then it doesn't really matter where it is because it's all publicly routable.
That's interesting. So when you start to make these migrations and you bring this auth tier into play, where it can be wherever, and you kind of put a facade out, which is the authentication and the security of whatever that involves, whether it's roles or something else.
Right.
And you bring your data back into the back there and you start to shift it around or move it around. Sometimes you might have other tiers, maybe like a caching tier between that.
Right.
Do you have some of those situations where the cache is like behind the auth or maybe even outside of the auth? Like if something doesn't really need to be secured and you've just put it out in a CDN per se.
Yeah, well, but there's attacks you can run on caching servers if you have them just exposed. And
That's true.
I don't know. I'm still learning. I'm like 5 months in.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I do right now is look and reactively respond to issues that I see through our monitoring suite. And then try to go back and reactively figure out what the heck happened. How can we monitor for that better? And then
Tell me some of that. What are you using for monitoring? Like what's that stack look like right now?
Sure. Right now what we have is Datadog. That's kind of our one-stop shopping for monitoring. We haven't stepped into the tracing level of things, which a lot of us are pushing for. Right. It just costs more money, and we need to really make sure it's what we want to do.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that when we spend that money, it's going to be because we have gotten everything else tightened down. We've got our monitors built, our service checks built, and so now we can get a lot of value for that tracing step. Right. Because if you don't really understand your applications, you're not really going to understand the data you get out of it.
Yeah, you might trace down into something, but then not know how to relate it back to the application.
Right, or what code you need to go fix.
Well, and that's the thing around the whole notion of observability, right? When you're trying to run analytics around that type of thing, you need that high cardinality, and you need the tracing to be brought up from the app so that you can look down into it versus just a bunch of data somewhere that doesn't particularly trace back to any particular thing. Like the various nodes or the various whatever that's being observed needs to know something about itself.
Right.
To be able to inform you.
Instrumentation, right? That's where you instrument your apps. You have to actually do something to your app to make it traceable. You know, that's the other side to observability, is that you need to actually act like something that can be seen. You know, in this site reliability engineering role, part of our job is to go out and proselytize best practices for being observable.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, so we're going to have some cool stuff coming up too. It's secret so far, but now you know. We got some meetups, other things coming up that are going to follow Prometheus, open tracing, et cetera, in Kubernetes, down through with Cassandra, et cetera, and kind of we're going to have somebody come in and talk about how to set up your system so that you really get good insight into all of your nodes, et cetera. So I think you'll like that one a lot. So keep an eye out on the schedule.
Oh, I will.
And we'll have a video produced that everyone out there in the internet land will be able to see.
Twitterverse.
The Twitterverse. Yeah, and the whatever other verse it is. All multi-tiered. So also we were kind of talking before we jumped on the show here about distributed caching.
Well, yeah,
which is kind of a weird thing.
The reason I don't know. I'm new to this. I come from an engineering, more of a mechanical aero background, and you know, one of the problems we had last year with our sale was we had a bunch of cache servers go down. So standing them back up, they had to rebuild their cache.
Wait, your sale, like a
sale, like
physical thing,
like
like selling
a time
products?
to make money.
Oh, okay. So something went down.
And yes, we had a problem. There was a big problem. This was before I was there, so it wasn't my fault.
Good job.
But I asked when I was told the story about how it all went. They said, yeah, our cache servers went down. We stood them back up. We increased the count of the nodes, the worker nodes, the instances. Yeah. And then they just thrashed the database as they were all trying to rebuild their caches. And I said, well, why couldn't you just stand those nodes back up and have them reach out to a pre-established cache?
Right.
A distributed storage. I mean, I was hot off doing Ceph projects, so I was thinking,
that's a good question.
Why not have that storage decoupled from the CPU?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting idea. And one of the things I was saying earlier is that it's often the most difficult thing is how to manage the state or the information in between your actual system of record and then the customer seeing it. And of course, I came up with the crazy analogy of that's like building bridges to islands with two people. And you don't always want to do that, but sometimes you do need a bridge to the island when there's now 5,000 people, right? It makes sense then in certain contexts. So the answer is always it depends with your cache layer, and especially when you want to get to the point where do you deal with a distributed cache, and what do you use for that? Like, do you pull Cassandra into the picture and then have a distributed cluster that's going to be just for your cache, and then something else still for your system of record, like a larger, Cassandra cluster? Or do you use a little bit of Redis in between, since it's known well for being extremely fast at point of node, things like that. So there's a lot of ways to tackle that problem, but not any clear-cut solutions. It's a little bit easier at the system of record when somebody comes to you and says, I have 19 petabytes of data, or whatever the next iterative number is there, and I want to make sure it's super resilient and accessible to all these points throughout the world. You're going to use a distributed database, something like Cassandra, because that's your option at that point. But with the caching tier, you never end up with that clear-cut thing until you drill down to the specific need of what you have. Like in the case of Netflix, they do some distributed caching where they have the movies out there at CDN endpoints. They make copies of their entire library at every CDN endpoint. So that, of course, is not that's not a viable option for everybody. Like a retail outlet might want to have all of their products and merchandise stored in a distributed sense out across various points throughout the world where they can get faster access to look at those things. But then, like, once you get your cart going, You need your mid-level cache that's going to keep track of that as you go. And if anything goes down, like say a region goes down and you have to shift your load over to another region that's up, you want to have a distributed database back there copying that frequently enough where it's not too much load,
Right.
but still there. So like this region goes down, you lose a little bit of your state. It
Yes.
reconnects to this new one and says, oh, okay, I lost I was trying to buy 5 shovels and 2 rakes, and I lost the rakes.
They were in my bag.
Right, they were in my bag. But at least you have managed some of it.
Okay.
So like in that situation, that's another way to manage that distributed state where you still have the stuff in the system of record going there every once in a while. But in the cache that's a little higher up, the faster cache where the products are, you might lose some of that, but then it's easy to go to the system of record and pick up kind of where you left off.
Yeah, I mean, hearing that, I'm starting to think that maybe that particular problem, that situation, was not really caused by the cache servers needing to get stood back up and thrashing the database. Mm-hmm. It was that the database itself was maybe under provisioned.
Underprepared, yeah. Well, and it could have been, right? I mean, if you have...
Because it should be able to just lose the cache server and still be fine.
Right, exactly. And if the failback was everything goes to the database now, and the database is
hurting
only X finite amount of capacity, you blow it away. Especially like if that's the relational database management problem, right? You have SQL Server or Oracle, and you've purchased X amount. You don't just whimsically scale up. So if you go over that spec, your database is gone. It's basically going to thrash. You're going to get way behind. You're going to start losing data or have some type of issue that's just going to knock you out of the water.
Right.
Yeah.
Ah.
So cool.
Knowledge.
So that's the beginning of many things that hopefully maybe we can have you back to talk about. And also more application development, cache layer, et cetera, specific topics that we're going to talk about in upcoming shows. So hope you enjoyed our conversation. Until next time, I'm Adron, and
I'm Travis.
Cheers.
I could dance.
Okay, ready for an outro. You ready?
I'm ready.
Ready?
Yep.
Get your dance on. And should I clap, or are we still synced? Okay.
Oh, yeah, we're recording. Oh, yeah, we don't stop. No.
So-
I get that for social media.
Yeah, this is perfect outro
That's
stuff.
my job today. This is wonderful. Thank you, Travis.
You're welcome.
All right, 1. Oh, God. So I'm Adron, and this is Travis. Okay, I'm going to count to 3 again on that one.
Okay.
Yeah! That's it. We just need a little tough stuff, a little guy stuff.
Thank you for joining us again for the Distributed Data Show. We love your feedback, so go to the Distributed Data Show page on DataStax Academy and tell us what you think. You can also find us on the DataStax Academy YouTube channel, or find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get great podcasts. While you're there, make sure and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.